I smelled trouble before I even saw the fence. Not the kind you can measure in feet and inches, the kind that raises the hair on your neck before your boots hit the gravel. It was just after dawn, the Texas horizon bleeding orange and a pale blue as I rumbled home from the cattle auction in my father's '87 F-250. The coffee in my travel mug had gone cold an hour ago, but I didn't dare pour out. Out here, wasting coffee feels like breaking a commandment. Rounding the bend on a Cottonwood Creek road, I braked so hard the tires spit dust. Where the familiar curve should have opened to my family's ranch drive, a wall of fresh lumber blocked the way, 8 feet high, raw boards glinting with dew like polished spite. A sign swung crooked on new nails, private road, Willowbrook Estates residents only. My jaw clenched. This wasn't just any road. My grandfather cut it by hand in 1962, long before subdivisions sprouted like weeds on our county line. Every stone and bucket of gravel laid with neighbors working shoulder to shoulder, the kind of sweat-built covenant you don't forget even when everyone else does. Someone had decided to forget. I killed the engine and stepped out into the morning hush, broken only by the restless shuffle of 30 Black Angus in the trailer behind me. They needed water, shade, feed, things a rancher provides without delay. But I stood frozen, staring at that barrier, feeling 60 years of family history jammed behind rough planks like a cattle chute. And then I heard it, heels clicking on asphalt. Vivian Blackwood emerged from the tree line in yoga pants and a white jacket bright enough to signal aircraft. Her pearl-white BMW idled to the shoulder, vanity plate glinting in the sun, Bliv. The queen of Willowbrook Estates never wasted an opportunity to make an entrance. "Well, good morning, Ezra," she purred, clipboard tucked under her arm like a scepter. "We've had to make improvements. Community safety issues, you understand." I understood plenty. Vivian was a lawyer by training and a tyrant by instinct. One of those people who treats small-town life like a boardroom hostile takeover. She'd been circling my family's 240 acres since she moved in last spring, hinting about progress and opportunity like a vulture circling roadkill. "Move that fence," I said flatly. Her smile thinned. "You'll need to find alternate access. These are residential standards now. Heavy ranch traffic just isn't compatible." The cattle bellowed behind me, impatient and hot in their metal cage. My hand curled into fists. "This is my road, built by my family. You got no right." "Democracy, Ezra," she said, voice cool as ice gin. "We voted." That was the moment something shifted in me. Not a spark, not a flash, but a slow, rising boil. Vivian thought I'd caved the way so many small landowners had before me. She figured I'd roll over, sell out, and let her HOA manicure every inch of this dirt into submission. But this land wasn't just dirt. It was blood and bone, my grandfather's calloused hands, my father's sweat in the August sun, and my own kids learning how to work before they could drive. I tipped my hat without another word, climbed back into the truck, and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Garrett Mills, old friend, property lawyer, and the kind of man who smelled opportunity in a fight. "Garrett," I said as soon as he picked up, voice shaking more from rage than nerves, "you busy?" "Depends," he drawled. "How illegal is it?" I stared at Vivian's gleaming BMW, at the fence that dared to claim what my family built, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Let's just say I told him, "It's about to get real educational out here." Vivian raised a manicured hand in a mock wave as I turned the truck around. I didn't wave back. My cattle were sweating in the trailer. My wife, Sarah, would be wondering where I was. And somewhere deep in my bones, I knew this wasn't going to end with a friendly chat over sweet tea. Some fights choose you. This one had my name carved on every post of that illegal fence. And I was about to carve it back, .by the time I backed the trailer through the side pasture gate and got the Angus watered. The sun was already high enough to turn every metal surface into a branding iron. Sarah met me by the barn, wiping her hands on her veterinary scrubs, eyes narrowing at the dust clouds still hanging over Cottonwood Creek Road. "What happened?" she asked, voice sharp enough to cut wire. I told her about the fence, about Vivian standing there like she owned the county. Sarah listened without interrupting, the way she always does when I'm halfway between fury and exhaustion. Then she gave that little nod I've come to respect more than any sermon. Quiet approval, silent promise. I'm with you. She's crossing a line, Sarah said finally. Call Garrett. Tonight. I already had. He'd told me to bring every scrap of paperwork we had on the road, the ranch, the old easement agreement my grandfather kept folded in a Bible. Garrett didn't waste words, but I could hear something in his voice I hadn't heard since high school football. Game time, adrenaline. Still, anger alone doesn't mend fences or pay feed bills. And while my gut burned for a fight, the rest of me knew that Vivian's kind never acted alone. People like her gathered followers the way thunderstorms gather charge, slowly, invisibly, until you're standing in the pasture wondering why the air tastes like metal. The first rumble came that evening. When I pulled into Murphy's feed, Bob Watson stepped out from behind the counter holding a paper he didn't look happy to see. Ezra, he said carefully, someone's been spreading word you're behind on payments. I laughed once, short and bitter. Bob, you've had my account clear for 15 years. Sure have, he said, tapping the invoice. But these rumors, well, folks talk. Sarah caught up to me outside, sliding her phone into her back pocket. Got another one, she muttered. Anonymous caller asking if I'm still licensed to practice. Said they heard complaints. Vivian's fingerprints were all over it, but she was too clever to leave evidence. Not yet. That night we spread old deeds and yellowed maps across the kitchen table like generals over a battle plan. The room smelled of coffee and paper dust. Our college kids calling in from campus to check on us, as if they could hear the storm brewing through the phone. Remember what Dad always said? Sarah murmured, tracing her finger over the faded easement language. Measure twice, cut once. Yeah, I muttered, jaw tight. I'm about to measure until she wishes she'd never seen a fence post. The next morning, Garrett confirmed what I'd suspected. They've got no legal right to block your road, he said, leaning back in his leather chair. Easement's perpetual, runs with the land. But Ezra, don't expect them to back down. HOA types fight dirty because they've got nothing else. He wasn't kidding. 2 days later, Miguel, my ranch hand since he was 17, showed up limping. He tried taking the Dieter road to deliver feed and hit a washed-out patch hidden by weeds. Bent the axle on his truck and wrenched his back bad enough, Sarah had to call in a favor at the county clinic. Seeing Miguel, tough as boot leather, grimace with every step was like a branding iron pressed right to my chest. This is what she's doing, Sarah said quietly as we sat by his hospital bed. She's not just making life hard. She's making it dangerous. I nodded, staring at the scuffed floor tiles, feeling something colder than anger take root. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about keeping people safe, my family, my crew, anyone unlucky enough to cross Vivian's crusade. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. When I answered, silence. Just breathing on the other end. The second call came an hour later. Then the third at 2 in the morning. Sarah met me in the hallway. Hair mussed from sleep, but eyes steady as steel. She's trying to shake us, she said. So we shake her first. By sunrise, our kitchen looked less like a home and more like a war room. Garrett's legal pad full of strategy. Sarah's veterinary contacts lining up expert witnesses. Even old Tom Rodriguez from the county planning office sitting at our table, sipping black coffee and shaking his head. Vivian doesn't know the kind of people she's poking, Tom said grimly. Out here, land isn't just property. It's bloodline. I stepped onto the porch, breathing the damp morning air heavy with cedar and dust, and watched a neighbor's truck slow at the end of the drive, window rolling down just long enough for a hand to wave in quiet solidarity. Vivian wanted to isolate us, but she was about to learn something about ranchers. We don't fight alone. And when we fight to win. The storm didn't break all at once. It started with little things. Missing mail, tire tracks where no truck should have been, the feeling of eyes on me when I checked fences at dusk. But the night it boiled over, it didn't whisper. It roared. I woke to cattle bellowing like sirens. That sound snaps a rancher awake faster than any alarm clock. I yanked on boots, grabbed a flashlight, and sprinted toward the lower pasture. The beam caught something that froze me in place. Water troughs bone dry, lines sliced clean, as if by knife. 30 head of thirsty Angus, restless and panicked under the August moon. Sarah came running behind me, phone in hand. "I'm calling emergency water service," she yelled over the racket. But my eyes weren't on her. They were on the trail cameras mounted by the fence. I bolted for the monitor in the barn office. Grainy black and white footage flickered to life. A figure in dark clothing crouched by the fence, bolt cutters glinting in infrared. And then, unmistakably, the gloved hand slipped just long enough to catch a bare wrist under the moonlight. A gold bracelet flashing. Vivian Blackwood had been on my land. I didn't even have to zoom in. I knew that jewelry. She wore it every time she strutted into Murphy's Hardware like she was shopping on Rodeo Drive instead of Millbrook County. Sheriff Patterson arrived at dawn, taking evidence photos while I stood off to the side, fist jammed in my pockets to keep from shaking. "Ezra, these bolt cutters that you got clear prints," he said grimly. "We'll match him in hours." Sarah was quieter than me, which meant she was angrier. "This isn't just harassment anymore," she said, voice tight. "She's endangering animals. People could get hurt." By noon, Patterson called back. The prints were Vivian's. He was filing charges, destruction of property, agricultural sabotage, maybe worse. I thought that would feel like victory, but it didn't. It felt like the start of something darker. Because when you corner someone like Vivian, you don't get surrender. You get claws. The retaliation came fast. She's pulling every string she's got. Miguel, still recovering from his injury, limped into the kitchen that night and dropped a folded note on the table. No signature, just 3 words scratched in angry ink. "Leave or pay." Sarah reached for my hand. "Ezra, we can't pretend this is just about property anymore," she whispered. "She's coming for our family." I'd always thought of myself as steady. Cattle prices rise and fall, fences break and get mended, storms pass. But sitting there with Sarah's fingers laced through mine, staring at that threat, something inside me cracked. For the first time, I felt fear, not for me, but for her, for our kids miles away at college, for everyone who worked this land with me. The next morning, Garrett laid it out plain. "You've got 2 choices. Fight harder than you ever thought possible, or fold." Folding wasn't in my blood, but fighting this kind of dirty meant becoming something I'd sworn I wouldn't be, calculating, relentless, willing to dig as low as my enemy. I drove out to the ridge that afternoon, the highest point on the ranch where you can see miles of rolling pasture. I sat on the hood of the old Ford, listening to cicadas hum and cattle low in the distance, and asked myself what my grandfather would have done. I knew the answer before the sun hit the horizon. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about survival. By the time I climbed down from that ridge, I made my choice. We were done playing defense. That evening, our kitchen table became a war room. Garrett spread maps and legal briefs. Sarah brought out property records older than I was. Tom Rodriguez from county planning rolled out aerial surveys showing Vivian's fence built without permits, blocking drainage lines. And I called every neighbor who still believed in this land. If she wants a fight, I told them, voice steady now, we're going to give her one. But we're doing it our way, with facts, with law, and with the truth she can't bury. Sarah squeezed my shoulder, eyes fierce. We hit her on every front at once, and we do it with dignity. The plan was simple. Expose every lie, every violation, every dirty secret Vivian had buried under that perfect manicure. But deep down, I knew something else. Once we started, there'd be no turning back. And somewhere in the dark, Vivian was planning her next move, too. The morning air felt sharp enough to cut. Even before sunrise, the ranch buzzed like a live wire. Trail cameras clicked in the dark. Garrett's paralegals sifted through stacks of deeds on our kitchen table, and Sarah moved with a focus I'd only seen when she was saving a dying foal. Our counterattack was ready, but Vivian wasn't about to stand still and take it. The first hit came at dawn. Sheriff Patterson rolled into the yard, dust trailing his cruiser like a comet tail. He held a folded letter in one hand. "Anonymous tip," he said grimly, handing it over. "Unsafe ranch conditions. Livestock waste contaminating groundwater. Recommend immediate state investigation." Sarah let out a sharp laugh. They're really getting creative now. By noon, it wasn't funny anymore. The The state inspector arrived, clipboard in hand, accompanied by 2 county officials and a news van that somehow just happened to be nearby. They combed through every pasture, every barn, every tank, and found nothing. Clean operation, no violations. But that didn't matter to Vivian. Her message was clear: I can reach you anywhere. Miguel's injury claim ballooned into a workers' comp case Vivian's people tried to twist against us. Rumors swirled in town about our finances. Sarah's veterinary clients started getting calls asking why they'd trust a doctor under investigation. Even our feed supplier received letters warning that association with the Thornfields may be risky for business. Every attack chipped away at something deeper than money. It chipped at our neighbors' trust, at the easy smiles in town, at the way folks waved on the road without hesitation. That night, Sarah found me out by the barn staring at the stars, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "Talk to me," she said softly. I shook my head. I knew she'd fight dirty, but I didn't think she'd drag you into it. Or Miguel. Or, hell, even the feed store. Sarah stepped closer, her hand slipping into mine, grounding me like she always did. "Ezra, listen to me. She's trying to break us before this ever hits court. You can't let her see it's working." But as working, I admitted, voice raw. "I am tired, Sara. Tired of wondering which neighbor believes her lies. Tired of answering midnight calls and watching you smile through the stress just so I won't worry." Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Then we fight smarter, not louder. She wants you angry because angry people make mistakes." The next day, we put our plan in motion. Garrett filed simultaneous complaints with federal, state, and county authorities: illegal fence construction, wetland violations, easement obstruction. Sarah organized a weekend Heritage Ranch tour, inviting families and reporters to see what our operation really looked like. The response shocked me. By Saturday morning, 24 pickups lined the county road. Old ranchers, young families, even folks from Willowbrook Estates who'd started questioning Vivian's leadership. Kids fed hay to gentle cattle, while Sarah explained rotational grazing and water conservation. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras rolled. Vivian showed up halfway through, her BMW nosing down the gravel drive like a shark in shallow water. She didn't get out, just sat there glaring behind tinted glass, cell phone glued to her ear. "She's calling someone," Sarah murmured. "She's not used to losing the narrative." That evening, Garrett called with news sharp enough to pierce the heat haze. "We got her," he said. "Found proof she knew about the easement and federal grant terms from day one. Emails from her law firm. That's fraud. Ezra, on her HOA board in the county." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt wary, because cornered predators don't roll over. They strike. Sure enough, the next blow landed before dawn. I woke to headlights sweeping across the bedroom window, 2 trucks idling at the edge of our drive. Strangers, watching. By the time I grabbed a shotgun and stepped outside, they were gone, tires spitting gravel into the dark. The fear I'd been swallowing finally hit me full force. This wasn't just a legal war anymore. It was personal, physical, dangerous. I looked at Sarah and saw the same thought in her eyes, unspoken but sharp. What if this doesn't stop before someone gets hurt? When Garrett arrived the next morning to prep for court filings, he caught me pacing the porch like a caged bull. "Ezra," he said carefully, "I need you calm for what's coming. We're about to hit her hard, and she's going to panic." I stared out across Cottonwood Creek Road at that illegal fence still standing like a scar across our land. "Good," I said quietly. "Let her panic, because this ends now, one way or another." Sarah slipped her hand into mine again. "Just make sure it ends with us still standing." The night broke with the sound of shattering glass. I bolted upright in bed as Sarah grabbed the phone. The kitchen window was a glittering hole, the air already thick with diesel fumes. Out front, Miguel's old pickup was burning. Hood up, flames curling skyward, throwing warped shadows across the barn. I didn't think. I moved. Bare feet on gravel, hose in hand, water roaring against fire as the night pulsed red and gold. By the time the sheriff's cruisers arrived, the truck was a smoking husk, and Sarah was shaking from fury more than fear. "They're escalating," Sheriff Patterson said, jaw set. This isn't vandalism anymore. This is arson. Sarah pressed a trembling hand against her temple. Ezra, this has to end now. It was more than fear. It was the weight of months of harassment, sabotage, lies. And now it had crossed into open violence. If Vivian wanted a war, we'd already been fighting one. But this was an attempt to burn us out. The next morning, Garrett called with a voice like flint. The evidence is airtight. We're filing for a federal injunction today. But Ezra, Vivian's desperate. Expect her to swing before she falls. He wasn't wrong. At noon, while I met with Garrett downtown, Sarah called in a voice I'd never heard before. Not afraid. Cold. Controlled. Ezra. She was here. Vivian. On the road. Shouting through a bullhorn about toxic cattle and unsafe property. By the time I raced home, the sheriff's deputies were already clearing a small crowd of gawkers and HOA loyalists. Sarah stood in the driveway, unshaken, holding a phone, still recording. On screen, Vivian ranted in designer sunglasses, pointing at our barn as if she'd caught us harboring nuclear weapons. That footage was gold, proof of defamation, harassment, trespass. Garrett's legal team practically purred when they saw it. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired to the bone. That evening, I called a meeting at the ranch. Every ally, every neighbor who'd stood with us packed into the barn under bare bulbs, humming with heat. Sarah stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes blazing. She's crossed every line, I said, voice low but steady. Tonight, we show her this family, this land, this community isn't for sale. Not now. Not ever. We rolled out the plan. Garrett would serve Vivian personally with court papers at dawn, a federal lawsuit, environmental violations, easement enforcement, and criminal referrals stacked thick as a feed ledger. Sarah's veterinary board cleared her record publicly that same night. And Tom Rodriguez from county planning confirmed. Vivian's fence was coming down by order of the court whether she liked it or not. The trap snapped shut faster than even I expected. At sunrise, Garrett and a deputy strode up Willowbrook's manicure drive. Cameras from every local news outlet were waiting, thanks to a leak Sarah had arranged. Vivian opened the door, still in her silk robe. Hair perfect, smile brittle. Ms. Blackwood, Garrett said calmly, handing her the thick envelope. You've been served. Federal court, county court, state violations. Take your pick. Oh, and the sheriff here has a warrant for agricultural sabotage. The smile cracked. For the first time, I saw fear replace that razor-edged arrogance. Reporters shouted questions as deputies walked her to a cruiser. Sarah stood just outside the crowd, phone steady, recording every step. But the true climax wasn't Vivian's arrest. It came later that morning at the courthouse steps. The judge, a rancher's son himself, signed the emergency injunction live on record. The fence must come down within 48 hours. Full restitution to be determined. Access to Cottonwood Creek Road restored immediately. I felt my knees nearly give, not from weakness, but from the release of months of pressure. Sarah slipped her hand into mine, fingers strong, grounding me. Around us, neighbors cheered, news cameras flashed, and Garrett grinned like a man holding a royal flush. Then Miguel limped up the courthouse steps, scars still fresh from his injury, and handed me a small scrap of paper. Found this on my porch this morning, he said quietly. The same 3 words as before, leave or pay. But this time I didn't feel fear. I felt something steadier, resolve carved in a bone. This is over, I told him, loud enough for the crowd to hear. She can't scare us anymore. And for the first time in months, I believed it. The fence came down on a cold morning that smelled of rain and cedar. No speeches, no cameras, just a crew with crowbars and work gloves, prying boards loose from the posts like pulling splinters from the earth. Each plank thudded onto the gravel, dull and final, until the barrier that strangled our family road was nothing more than scrap wood stacked on a flatbed. I stood there with Sarah, boots sinking in the soft ground, watching Cottonwood Creek Road stretch open again like it had for 60 years. Miguel leaned on his crutch beside me, smiling despite the scar running down his back. Looks better this way, he said simply. Vivian wasn't there to see it. She was busy posting bail, her pearl-white BMW already impounded as evidence in an investigation that would take months to unravel. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't care what she was plotting. Her power was gone. The settlement offer came fast, quicker than I expected. $275,000 plus every dime of legal fees. But no check could repay months of fear, sleepless nights, and threats against my family. I took the deal not for the money, but for the principle. It was Vivian's signature on the paper, admitting in writing what she tried so hard to deny. We didn't celebrate with champagne. We celebrated with coffee on the porch at dawn, watching cattle graze where they belonged. No reporters, no shouting crowds, just the quiet hum of a ranch coming back to life. But the victory wasn't only ours. The neighbors who'd once looked away now came by with handshakes and awkward apologies. Even a few Willowbrook families stood in our yard, hats in hand, saying they never knew what Vivian was really doing behind closed doors. I believed them, because when fear runs a community, good people hide too. Sarah turned our fight into something bigger. She launched the Heritage Ranch Fund with part of the settlement, giving scholarships to rural kids studying agriculture and law. If we had to bleed for this, she said, let's make sure somebody else doesn't. Garrett started getting calls from ranchers 3 counties over asking how we did it. And I realized what we'd built was more than a legal win. It was a blueprint. Proof that you don't have to bow to money or power when you've got truth, grit, and neighbors who still believe in shaking hands over fence lines. Months passed. The road stayed clear. Our cattle prices rose with the season. And slowly, the shadows Vivian left behind stopped clinging to our porch at night. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and cicadas sang their first summer chorus, Sarah and I walked that old gravel road barefoot like we used to when we were kids. The same road my grandfather built stone by stone. The same road Vivian tried to claim with paper and arrogance. Do you think he'd be proud? I asked, kicking a loose pebble. Sarah didn't answer right away. She just looked down the long stretch of gravel and sky, her hair glowing in the last orange light. I think he'd tell you what he always told you, she said softly. Land isn't just something you own. It's something you carry, and you carried it well. I'll let the silence sit, heavy but warm. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote barked once, twice. The sound rolled over the pasture like an old song I'd almost forgotten. I thought about all the nights lying awake wondering if we'd lose everything. About the strangers parked at the end of our drive, the calls in the dark, Miguel's injury, Sarah's steady courage. And I knew this fight had cost us something we couldn't measure in dollars, something deeper than property lines. But it had given us something too, a reminder of who we are when someone tries to break us. The road gleamed pale under the moon when we reached the gate. I rested my hand on the post, rough with age but steady as the day it was set. Cottonwood Creek Road, I murmured. Still here, still ours. Sarah smiled, slipping her arm through mine. Just like it was always meant to be. We walked home in the quiet, gravel crunching underfoot, the kind of sound that tells you a place remembers who it belongs to. And I swear, for just a moment, I felt my grandfather walking there with us, carrying that road right alongside me.